Ron Paul is a former U.S. representative and a highly respected voice on the economy. He's also a pretty big fan of gold. Dr. Paul, thanks so much for joining us again.
Nice to be with you. Thank you.
Look, let's dig right into gold. It just had its best day in a year. Some people saying that the bottom is in here. What do you think is driving gold right now? Is it the prospect of low rates, taper talk, some of this short covering? Why the sharp rebound?
Well, I don't like to pretend I know what, precipitates these short swings up and down. Markets move and they get too high, they come back down. They find all kinds of excuses. I look at it more as a fundamental monetary system. I see gold as money, and when gold goes down, that means the dollar is going up temporarily. But long term, the only thing that I think is really important is the creation of new money and credit. And nobody is arguing the case that we're not doing that. The only argument is are we going to create $85 billion of new money a month, or is it going to be 75? And the markets won't even tolerate thinking about 75. So long-term fundamental says that they're printing the money, they're doing it like crazy. I've watched this since 1971, and believe me, the printing is going to continue, and the value of the dollar is going to go down, and gold will go up.
All right. Well, you're talking about Chairman Ben Bernanke on Thursday. He said something in front of Congress that had some of the gold bugs out there a little confused. I want to play the clip for you. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
A lot of people hold gold as an inflation hedge, but the movements of gold prices don't predict inflation very well. Actually, I think psychologically, the gold price going down is not necessarily a bad thing from that perspective. It suggests people have somewhat more confidence and are less concerned about really bad outcomes. But let me just end by saying that nobody really understands gold prices, and I don't pretend to really understand them either.
Dr. Paul, if you were on that committee, how would you have responded to Chairman Bernanke?
I would say, yeah, you're right. It doesn't do a lot of good on the short run from day to day on saying what the gold price is telling us. But I would still stick to my argument that gold is a real good long-term identifier on the value of a currency and the value of our dollar. I mean, if you look at the 100 years, it's very easy. $20 up to $1,800, now still $1,300, and we're printing money faster than ever. And there's pretty good evidence right now there's a shortage of physical gold. The physical gold market has always been strong, and that's going to continue. This is going to be sorted out. And after these corrections, sometimes you see an explosion. Even though I'm not into as a technician on gold, I suspect that could happen. But I think long-term you can expect governments not to change. We're going to see more Detroits. Eventually, the government of the United States will be somewhat similar to Detroit because people will give up their confidence in us. They're going to give up confidence in the dollar, and eventually they'll give up confidence on our military, and then you are going to see some real changes in this system, which has been built on a fiat dollar for the last 40 years.
Dr. Paul, you mentioned the Detroit bankruptcy, and you said that may not be the last one that we're going to see. How do you think this story plays out, not only in Detroit, but also nationally?
Well, I'll be surprised if the feds don't come in. They probably won't say they are, but they're already in. I mean, think of all the welfare programs. Every time somebody's unemployed, they're going to get some benefits. The food stamps won't start, so the feds are very much involved. But there's going to be a lot more cities, and there will be a limit. It might push it over. If 10 cities declare tomorrow and the feds say, well, we can't let this happen, we got to bail them out like we bailed out the banks, 4 or 5 years ago, that could do great damage to the dollar. There's a limit that the markets will tolerate. I'm surprised that the markets have been rather tolerant. The Chinese have been tolerant. They still take our money. They still loan it back to us. But there's an end point, and nobody knows when that'll come. But I imagine we're getting closer and closer to it every single day.
On a different note, Dr. Paul, before I let you go, we are inching closer to 2016. Just curious, would you like to see your son run for president?
Oh, I think that would be very nice, and I think he'd have a very good chance, and I think he's doing very well.
So do you think he's going to run?
I don't know. It's amazing. Although we're a very tight family, Rand and I don't talk about politics very much. Even when he was running for the Senate and different things, it's not nearly as it's been construed on the internet that there's all this planning going on. But it just looks like he's fascinated with it. He's doing a good job. He's getting a lot of attention, and his views somewhat similar to mine. So I would have to say that there's reason to encourage him.
All right, so sounds like a very hopeful dad there. Dr. Paul, thank you so much.
While I'm in favor of the Senate retaining our prerogative to declare war, we do have the power to begin or to not begin a war. That is a power the Constitution gave us. But I don't think the Constitution intended to have 535 generals. I don't think it intended to have us explicitly talking about every contingency plan for every possible war in every corner of the globe.
There's a threat to our national security. You never act secretly through the CIA or doing anything militarily without the consent of Congress.
That's our business. That's what we do all the time, where we're making enemies. I mean, we're in drone warfare any place, anytime we want to go, and we overthrow governments when we want to dispose of them after propping them up, and then people just get angry at us. Right now, we're stirring up another fight in Syria, and who knows when it'll come to Iran. So it's on and on. We're always building up enemies. And it's our aggressiveness, our imposing our will on other people. We wouldn't put up with it here. The American people would band together and object to it. And we shouldn't be surprised when other countries object to what we do to them.
In fact, I'm appalled that anyone would think that we could arrest anyone in our country without charging them and giving them a right to a trial. It seems so fundamentally un-American.
Put in private prisons and never get a trial. There's something very un-American about that, let me tell you.
We have a chance to replace fear with confidence. Confidence that no terrorist and no country will ever conquer us if we remain steadfast to the principles of our founding documents. We have nothing to fear except our own unwillingness to defend what is naturally ours, our God-given rights. We have nothing to fear that should cause us to relinquish our rights as free men and women. I urge my colleagues to reject fear, to reject the siren call for ever more powerful government. A right to a jury trial is granted criminal defendants in order to prevent the oppression of government. It's not just about a fair trial. It's about checking your government. Because they know the American people are with me. If you ask questions, should we send money to countries that don't like us and disrespect us? 80 to 90% of the American people are with me on this. I'm just saying you don't have to bribe people to be your friend. We don't have the money anyway. We got to borrow the money from China to send it to Pakistan. I'm not saying don't have relations with Pakistan. Many in Pakistan have been sympathetic to our country. Many in Pakistan have helped our country. But many in Pakistan, with a wink and a nod, look at us, take our money, and laugh at us. They cash our check and they laugh at us. The American people are tired of this. Our treasury is bare. There are a multitude of reasons why we should not continue to send good money after bad.
70% of our military money is spent overseas, subsidizing rich allies. It should be spent on the defense of this country.
We give Egypt $3 billion a year, and you know what? Egypt can't protect or won't protect our embassy.
Money down a rat hole, down the drain, wasteful. We don't have it. We can't hardly borrow it anymore, so we print it. And we can't buy friendship, we buy more enemies. And I've argued that we have only two types of foreign policy we offer. If they do exactly what we tell them, we give them money. If they don't do it, then we go and bomb them. But it looks like now we do both. We give them money and they kill us with our money.
My position is not one penny more for Libya or Egypt or Pakistan until they act like our allies. Let's send it when they start behaving like civilized nations and come to their senses. Why don't we take half of the $4 billion that we wouldn't send to Pakistan? Let's take half of that and put that into veterans benefits. I'm willing to triple the size of the Veterans Benefits bill if we'll take the money from an area where we shouldn't be spending it. What I would be asking for is 15 minutes of the Senate's time to vote on ending this aid and taking half of the $4 billion that we're squandering overseas, giving to people who don't like us, take half of that aid and put it towards the deficit, and take half of that aid and put it into veterans benefits. Let's memorialize those people who sacrificed their lives and the veterans by saying we're not going to give money to a country that disrespects and disavows everything we've done over the last 10 years to combat terrorism. Currently, Congress has about a 10% approval rate. One of the reasons is we don't even obey our own rules. For goodness sakes, 600-page bill, and I got it this morning. Not one member of the Senate will read this bill before we vote on it. We're going to vote on this in the next 30 minutes. I and Senator Lee and others will object to this. We'll have a point of order that our own rules say that it has to be posted online for 48 hours. 600 pages. No one will read it. No wonder our approval rating is 10%. Nobody knows what we're voting on.
Last week, the Senate and House demonstrated again why their approval ratings are so low. The 164-page fiscal cliff bill was made available to senators just 3 minutes before the vote was taken on the legislation. No one can read 154 pages in 3 minutes, so it's safe to assume that the legislation was passed without being read. Then the House brought the lengthy and controversial bill to vote just 22 hours after the text had been available, meaning a full reading of the legislation was not likely possible.
This isn't the way we should operate. The American people want to know, why do we all of a sudden say, oh, the government's going to shut down if we don't do something in 3 days? Well, what were they doing for the previous 3 months? What's going on up here? I have a bill in Congress that says we should read the bills before we pass them. It says that we should wait 1 day for each 20 pages. So we'd be given time to read 600-page bills. Zero on the other side of the aisle voted for their own president's budget. How are we going to get to compromise if they're not showing up for work? How are we going to get anything done if they don't obey their own rules? I think this is why the American people are unhappy with what's going on in this body. I object strenuously to it. I will vote against this, and I will raise a point of order that says we should read the bills before we pass them. We'll just overturn this by saying we are the majority and we deem it so. We are the majority. We don't care what's in the bills. We don't care to take the time to read the bills. We are in the majority and we deem it so.
That is a problem. You know, when there's a Read the Bills Act over there, and of course I think that's a proper thing to do. You ought to read the bill. There was a senator, I can't think of his name. I think he was from Kentucky. And he was able to stop that. Once it got out on the table, they said, oh, we didn't know that was in there. Of course, that's always possible because they don't have the biggest idea what they're voting on most of the time. But, I have to admit, I haven't read all those bills. I mean, if they're 1,000 pages long, my staff has good instructions. They say they have an easy job. They say all they have to do is show me if it's unconstitutional. So a lot of times they only have to read the first page.
Now, I have voted for sanctions on Iran and don't think it's a good idea that Iran have nuclear weapons. We've been at war for a decade now. We've been at war in Afghanistan, and I supported going to Afghanistan, but I'm ready to come home from Afghanistan. We were at war in Iraq for nearly 10 years. I'm glad we're coming home from Iraq, but I don't want to automatically commit our country to a war in Iran.
Why don't we, pay attention? Why should we? The greatest danger we face today is carelessly starting a war against Iran because of a weapon they don't have. And even recently retired head of the Mossad said that would be the stupidest thing in the world for us to do is start bombing Iran because they might have a nuclear weapon.
Historically, our country, we have had defensive wars. Nobody messes with us, and I agree with that. You mess with the United States, there will be significant repercussions. We won't let you invade other countries, and we won't let you invade the United States. But the idea that we will have offensive war and not defensive war is a concept that is new in our history. And I think it's a dangerous one. A country that vows to never contain an enemy is a country that vows to always preemptively attack. I'm proud of being for a strong national defense. I'm proud of being for protecting our country. But I cannot accept a resolution that says we will completely get rid of the containment strategy that really was a strategy that kept us safe for 60 years during the most aggressive and dangerous war we've ever encountered, the Cold War.
We do away with the confrontation, but stand firm and sure of ourselves.
Some would argue that the leadership of North Korea is equally as irrational as the leadership of Iran, if not more so. So we are able to contain a two-bit socialist, very small and unproductive country like North Korea. I see no reason why, if we had to, we couldn't contain Iran.
I've come to the conclusion that I see no threat to our national security. There's no convincing evidence that Iraq is capable of threatening the security of this country, and therefore very little reason, if any, to pursue a war.
I think the Iraq war was a mistake. I wasn't here, but I would have voted no. I fear that we're pushing on. Every month there has to be a new and more bellicose resolution to ensure that we will go to war and that at all costs we will go to war in Iran. I think it's a mistake. But you know, there are other things to do. Besides saying we will always have to go to war, I don't for 1 minute believe everything they say or think that they're trustworthy, but it's better than war to have negotiations, even with a fallible and perhaps deceitful partner sometimes, but it's still better than war. Our soldiers are not inanimate clay that we put on this master board of chess, this geopolitical chess game to move around. These are young men and women who live in your neighborhood, who live in the neighboring town. And when I think about war, or when I think about this resolution, I don't think about empty black and white words on a page. I think about those young men and women and my commitment, my real and strong commitment that I'm not going to war without absolute provocation, without a threat to the national security, and for goodness sakes, without a debate over it.
We'd get out of the Persian Gulf, we'd back off, we'd bring all our troops home, we'd bring all our missiles home, we'd defend America. And we wouldn't, anytime they threatened us, we'd defend ourselves. We'd have armed neutrality. But we would reduce the number of nuclear bombs maybe by 75%. We wouldn't get rid of them, but we'd drastically reduce them.
I'm only concerned about me being able to convince people that we need to change our attitude in Washington, that the status quo won't work, that we need a new foreign policy, we need to look at the Federal Reserve, we need to balance our budget, we need to live within the rule of law, we need to care about civil liberties. That's what I care about.
Hey. Sun, hear the wind stop blowing, see the holes in the